There is definitely more than one right way to do things. I'll talk about that a bit because I've mentioned that before that, one size does not fit all, and there's more than one right way to do things, and, you got to be flexible and, stuff like that. I've talked about all these things, but, recently, a very good horseman actually confirmed what I've been saying, and it was kind of interesting. It was, I'm in Canada. This gentleman comes over from England, well known in his territory, specializes in carriage horses more than anything. But a horse is a horse, and they still need the same basics. And when you first start them, anyhow, I was rather surprised that he came to town, and not only that, but very close by. And so I went over and I watched a little demo that he did. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I did see him get to work with about 3 different horses. And I got to see something rather interesting. Well, at first I was ready to jump up and say, "Hey, you're doing it wrong," because he doesn't do things the way I do. See, I'd been watching his YouTube videos for a few years, and I was always rather impressed by the finished product, but his videos never really showed much of how he does it. And I was kind of curious. I wanted to watch him in action and see what he does. And then when I got to watch him in action, I noticed, well, he's doing things a lot different than I do. But there's no denying the results. The guy is extremely good. And like I said, initially, I was tempted to jump up and say, "Hey, you're doing it wrong." But I resisted that urge, and I kept my mouth shut, and I kept my ears open, and I watched and paid attention, and I started noticing a few things that, the underlying principles behind what he was doing were really a lot the same as me. He adjusts himself to each individual horse because, like I said, I got to see him work with a few different ones, and I got to watch how he did it. He was fair with the horses. He was very kind to the horses, but he was firm and consistent. And, very quickly he got results because of that. So he was, firm, fair, consistent, flexible, all these same things that I do. But his methods and techniques were a little different. Not quite the way I do things, but there was no denying it worked. And actually, I'm going to put a link in the description to one of his YouTube videos that is one of my favorites. It really demonstrates what can be accomplished, if you take the time to put a little effort in and do some proper training. And I'll summarize the video. It's he's got 2 young stallions and a mare in heat, all on the same carriage, 3 abreast. And just to prove it can be done, that you can have stallions and mares in heat together and they can behave and do what they're told. I thought it was a really good video, and it also he talks a little bit about his attitude towards horses, and just to reaffirm that, one of the things he says at the demo is he's talking about how he gets up at 5 o'clock every morning, and the first thing he does is he goes out and says hi to the horses. That says a lot about the guy right there, I think. So anyhow, there's more than one right way to do things. His ways aren't the same as mine, and I doubt that he's going to influence me all that much in what I do. I think I'm going to be doing a lot of the stuff pretty much the same. But, it reaffirmed that there's absolutely no question you can do things completely different and still get extremely good results. He was, very gentle with the horses. He was kind to the horses, but he was firm and he was consistent and he was a good leader for them and everything else. He did all the right things. And, the underlying principles I've talked about, the mentality is more important than the methods and techniques, because that mentality leads to your principles. And if you take, a half a dozen or so principles and use them for all the different situations, you can modify your methods and techniques any old way you want and still end up with extremely good results. And he proved it because, like I said, he does things quite different than I do. But there's absolutely no denying that he's probably a far better horseman than I am. So there's no question about the fact that you can do things differently, and they still work very well, as long as the underlying principles are basically still the same. And, that's what I want to emphasize here today is, there's more than one right way to do things. Just remember that. Don't be scared to be a little bit different and step outside the box. And if somebody says, "Well, it's not the right way to do it," because you're doing something that you have been successful with, that has worked for you, Maybe you're following a different trainer or clinician than they are, and they think that you should be doing things their way. Well, don't let that get to you, okay? Don't be afraid to be different. You will take some criticism for it. I mean, I have gotten some flack for some of the things that I do too, because I don't do it the same as a lot of other people, but that's okay. There's more than one right way to do things. And that's one of the reasons, like I said, I don't like doing training videos, because I don't want anybody thinking that my way is the only way or the right way. Because, well, even with these three here, I've done things very different with all three of them. And like I said, there's more than one right way to do things. And it all depends on you, the horse, your situation, what facilities you have available. You're going to have to get flexible and do things a little bit differently. This one is really a pest now. Hard to believe that this horse was hard to catch and spooky and nervous when I got her. And now she's just a big suck. Anyhow, almost too much. But, like I said, that's one of the reasons I don't do training videos. I don't want you thinking that, there's, it's got to be done a certain way. I will probably eventually, I think I've done a couple where I've, suggested a few ways of doing things, and I'll probably do a few more, but, don't get hung up on that stuff. The mentality that you have is going to be far more important than any method or technique you're ever going to learn. But learn as many different ones as possible, because like I said, I've had to do things differently with all three of these. And if I had another one, I'd probably have to do things different with that one too. And that was one of the things that, I watched this guy. He did it different with, each one of the horses that he worked with. And, he also made comment about that, how you have to, adjust yourself to the personality of the horse. And that's important. And that's one of the things that I do. So in spite of the fact that initially I wanted to jump up and say you're doing it wrong, no, he wasn't really doing it wrong. He was just doing it different, but not. He was still using the same basic principles. He was doing things much like I do in a way. On the outside, it didn't look the same, but if you watched what he was actually doing, it was the same. It just looked very, very different. So, don't be afraid to be a little bit different, and just remember, there's more than one right way to do things. Have a good day.